Hey guys, so for this video, I decided to come outside because I am tired of being cooped up in the house, as I'm sure you are too. So I am sitting in my driveway. It's my house, it's my chimney, those are the trees. It's a lovely day here in South Carolina. I think it's 84 degrees right now. Jack's riding his tricycle. I won't forget. And so you might see him zooming past, and there might be, who knows what sounds we'll hear, but anyway, it was time to do something different. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen because today we are talking about one of my favorite topics. And I'm super bummed that we're not together in class for this because it's such a good one right now. We are talking about mass communication and politics in the digital age. So I said also known as, what has Twitter done? But that's just a joke. So it's interesting because when we started our class, I thought at this point we would be talking a lot about the current presidential campaign. I figured we would have a clear Democratic nominee, which we do, and it's Joe Biden. But I figured that a lot of media would be focused on that campaign. But of course, COVID-19 has thrown everything off in its wake, and that's one. So darn it, I was really hoping we'd have some good campaign ads to talk about and maybe even some sound bites, but alas. So it will be interesting to see how these campaigns carry on now that everything has to be digital. So both campaigns have stopped having rallies, obviously, and they're moving to more online platforms, online town halls, telephone call-in town halls. And so it's really a whole different way of going about a presidential campaign. So that's something you should pay attention to as the months go on toward the summer and even through the summer as we head toward the campaign. The Democratic National Convention has been postponed, and now there's discussions about having a virtual convention. Might be too early to call on that one, but it's definitely going to be a really interesting campaign for you guys to pay attention to as those who study communications, because the traditional means that candidates go through to communicate, some of those are just won't happen. The last Democratic debate that we watched was in front of no audience. It was just Bernie and Joe Biden, and it's a whole different feeling, a whole different vibe when there's no audience there. So it'll be really intriguing to see how this plays out. And I really would love for you to pay attention to that and email me, or we can chat about it over the summer because I'll be watching that really closely and into the fall as well. All right, so mass communication and politics in the digital age. So you cannot have this conversation without talking about President Donald Trump. And the first thing I would really like for you to do is to pause this video and then go back to the playlist on YouTube and watch the video. It's like a brief history of Donald Trump's campaign. And when you're watching it, I just want you to think about how many media moments were there and what you think about that. Certainly his campaign was full of a lot of controversial moments and controversial statements. And there's a lot of criticism on the media for how they handled it, that they didn't take him seriously as, oh, Jack ran into me with his tricycle, that they didn't take him seriously as a candidate, and so didn't push him as hard as they were pushing other candidates in terms of their criticism or questioning, that many of the late night talk shows he appeared on, the hosts avoided the hard-hitting questions. Jimmy Fallon got a lot of flack for that back in the day. But also that there's articles that suggest that journalism failed because it didn't really go for the attack on some of the things that Donald Trump said during his campaign. Those are not my opinions. Those are just some opinions from communications research that you'll see if you look for it. And there's so much to read about this campaign on the internet. I definitely spent like an hour and a half of my life trying to find just the right article or just the right video to show you, and it would just need to be a class of its own. So pause this now and go watch that so that you have that kind of you've got some of that in your mind. I will warn you that there is some strong language on it, so just know that, and some statements that some people found very well. Anyway, just watch it. All right, and then come back. All right. hopefully you're back. You've watched that. We're going to come back to it in a little while. I want to start with this quote by Joseph Pulitzer. It's in your textbook as well. Our republic and its press will rise or fall together. An able, disinterested, public-spirited press with trained intelligence to know the right and courage to do it can preserve that public virtue without which popular government is a sham and a mockery. A cynical, mercenary, demagogic press will produce in time a people as base as itself. The power to mold the future of the republic will be in the hands of the journalists of future generations. And I'm curious to know what you think about that, if you agree or disagree, to what extent that's still true. What are some trends you've seen or some events that have occurred that support this statement or that pull it into question? Does the media, does the press, do journalists really have this kind of sway over our country? Is it still there? Has it been lost? It's just a point to think about when you think about the role of journalism today. Okay, so politicians using the news. So politicians use the news in various ways. This is not campaign ads. This is strictly the news. So in terms of news leaks, so sometimes a campaign will leak something on purpose and act as if they didn't. We've seen leaks before looking at different issues. With the current administration, there have been some leaks that were damaging and led to some challenges. But in a campaign, you can also leak some news about your candidate as well, and that way you can kind of gauge public opinion. The same kind of thing can be said for trial balloons. So trial balloons are leaking a proposal or an idea that you haven't necessarily finalized, just to see how the public will respond. And then sound bites. Sound bites have shifted quite a bit over the years. As I put here on the slide, in 1968, the average amount of time spent on a sound bite was 42.3 seconds. And today I think we think of sound bites as these like little short clips, but sound bites were particularly the time that the time that a news subject was allowed to speak without editing. So it was basically like the amount of time you have before we're going to cut away from you, like just pure time. And so in 1968, it was 42.3 seconds, which isn't a lot of time, but it's a good chunk. By 1988, the average time was 9.8 seconds. That's how much time someone has to speak uninterrupted or unedited. Today, we also think of sound bites as just those short little clips or quips and phrases that get used and manipulated. If you watch the video I suggested, the campaign ad that was just put out by Joe Biden, it uses sound bites and you don't manipulate the sound bites, but you take them out of context and you string them together to create a narrative or a suggestion. And that's what he does in that new campaign ad. Okay, the changing tone of political coverage. So this is fascinating, and this goes back to communication research as well. And I want you to think about why this is. In 1960, 75% of candidate news reports were positive in tone. 75%. That's a lot. I don't even have to tell you the statistic, and we know that that is not the case today. But that's what it was. It was positive presentations for the most part. By 1992, so 32 years later, only 40% of candidate news reports were positive in tone. So we went from 3/4 down to less than half are positive news reports about candidates. We've shifted to the negative. Interestingly, in May 2017, Trump's coverage was 80% negative in tone, covering his first 100 days of office. And for comparison's sake, Obama was at 41% negative for his first 100 days, 47% for George W. Bush, 60% for Clinton. And so he had a rough 100 days in terms of the tone of news coverage. And I don't know how much you were paying attention to it back then. I hope that you were. But that sounds about right based on everything that I remember seeing at the time. I would also point out that along with those numbers, CNN and NBC were 93% negative in the stories that they ran about Trump or in the first 100 days, and Fox News was 52% negative. So over half of the news reports on Fox News were also negative about President Trump during his first 100 days of office. So it wasn't fully a partisan thing, although certainly you can see the numbers are very different, 93% and 52, but he did get a lot of negative press in his first 100 days of office. So I'm curious, it's just a point to ponder. It could be something you could explore in a research paper, why the tone has changed to the negative. Don't step across, please. Easter Bunny, go around. Thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, you're wearing Easter Bunny ears. What was I to think? But why do you think the tone has shifted over time? Is it because we have more media surrounding campaigns? Is it because there's more negative campaigning these days and it changes the tone? What do you think? I don't know the answers, but it's an interesting point to ponder. Okay, opinion polls. So generally speaking, opinion polls are conducted by third-party sort of professional polling people. Sorry, I'm distracted by my son wearing Easter Bunny ears and riding around. Gallup is one that does a lot of opinion polls. It's considered pretty neutral. And so the attempt is to get a neutral or a balanced group to poll. Now, of course, in 2016, the polls, everything was upset because the polls all showed that Hillary Clinton was going to win that presidential election. You should ask your parents or someone who was a voter at that time. I guess some of you could have been voting at that time, but about the polls and about what the climate was like back then, because the polls were all suggesting that Hillary Clinton was going to win, and then she didn't, and it really was this huge shock for a lot of the nation because the polls were so inaccurate. Now, there's another kind of poll that I find really fascinating. It's called a push poll, and these are political advertisements that appear to be a telephone poll, but they're actually telemarketing campaigns. So I experienced one of these once when I answered the phone when it was an unlisted caller, which I don't know why I answered the phone, but I answered it, and they said, "Would you take a political poll?" It was all automated. And I was like, "Oh, sure, I love taking polls and I love talking about politics." So I clicked yes, and it said, "Do you have a favorable opinion of," I can't remember which candidate it was. And I said, "Yes." And then it said, "But did you know that this candidate supports," and then it went on this whole negative thing. And so a push poll asks questions and then responds to your answers with negative information about a candidate. And the purpose is to try to sway voters. I mean, this is legal. It happens all the time. It's an interesting experience to have. But the problem is that a lot of people don't realize that's what's going on. So it's important to be informed about things like that. Okay, negative advertising. About a third of ads and campaigns are negative, and the trend is more and more negative campaigning with every year and every campaign that we see. The concerns about negative advertising are that they often promote falsehoods or they encourage false inferences. So earlier when I was talking about the Biden advertisement they use as the sound bites, on one hand, these are President Trump's words. He said these things. On the other hand, you can look up the fact checking, and some of them are taken out of context as part of something longer that he said that kind of tempers what the advertisement is trying to do. So there is some manipulation that's done with negative ads. Certainly the ad I had you watch, oh, please tell me you watched it, with the Rick Perry ad against Mitt Romney. Certainly that has some false inferences in it, although it's, it also uses some of Romney's own words. But so, there's ethical questions when it comes to negative ads. In terms of effectiveness, a lot of studies have been done on negative ads, and interestingly enough, they're on the rise, and yet people don't seem to like them. So the recent research has found that negative ads often have a negative impact on the campaign, especially the campaign that initiated the negative ad campaign. So I remember when I was voting in a primary one year, and I decided that anyone I saw a negative campaign ad from, I just wasn't going to vote for them. And I ended up voting, and my husband always jokes about this as being one of my wasted votes because there was no way the person I voted for was going to win. And they did not win. But I just couldn't take it, all the negative ads. I found it so at the time, I think the word I would have used was gross. Like, I just wasn't going to support somebody who went on the attack. I want to know what you're going to do, not why not the other person. I'm a little more nuanced now, but certainly I would fit into this particular research conclusion. The research also showed that the majority of studies have shown that voters dislike campaign ads and that they tend to alienate younger voters. Younger voters in particular are not into the negative campaign ads. Older voters can be kind of brought in by the negative ads, but younger voters, you guys aren't falling for it and you don't like it. So, okay, politics and entertainment. So, politics. Oh, I think I'm missing one on here. Oh, well, it's okay. Politics can be entertaining, and politicians use slogans and taglines, which are entertainment, essentially. Let me move this a little bit high. And they can be really helpful and catchy, and we remember them. So I put some on here that I have found very memorable over the years. Of course, we have the Trump Make America Great Again, which is intriguing for a couple of reasons. One is now it's like a built-in re-election slogan, Keep America Great, which I've seen. In fact, my neighbor right over there, they have that sticker on their car. Make America Great Again is also very close to Reagan's 1980 slogan, which was Let's Make America Great Again. And so Trump using that was trying to evoke the sense of Reagan. And for many traditional conservatives, Reagan is considered, just sort of the pinnacle of conservatism. And so by doing that, he connects himself with Reagan. But also what's intriguing about that slogan, Make America Great Again, suggests that America's not great. And of course, that's part of what Donald Trump ran on. Interestingly, during the 2016 election, and you can look this up if you would like, Canada put out a public service announcement. It played in the United States, and it was Canadians talking about what they loved about America, and the theme was, America, you're already great. And so that was really intriguing. It was paid for by an organization in Canada, I do believe. But it might be worth your watch because it was a really intriguing for them to step in like that into our into what was going on in the United States. Here's some other ones. I liked Jeb Bush. Jeb can fix it. That's a great slogan because it's short, it's brief, it's to the point, it's nothing metaphorical. Just if things are broken, Jeb can fix it. Oops, hold on, we'll go back to that. Feel the burn, which is just a great slogan as well. Feel the burn for Bernie. Obama's there were several, but one of them was Yes We Can. And he had one about hope and one, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember. There was another big one with Yes We Can. I can't remember. But Yes We Can was one. And so he was trying to run a positive campaign against John McCain about the things that we can do together. So this sort of looking ahead and looking in front of us and trying to reach a goal. That was sort of the idea with it. I'm with her was a Hillary Clinton campaign slogan. And that one had the emphasis on her candidacy to be the first female president. She had a couple others as well. One was Better Together. So it was about unity and trying to unify America. So the slogans can matter. I would also say that there's some interesting stories about candidates wanting to use music by certain artists. So for example, for a while, Born in the USA by Bruce Springsteen, which is a fantastic song. Born in the USA. I know you're like, please stop. So I will. Both Democrats and Republicans have used Born in the USA. And finally, Bruce Springsteen came out and forbid Republican candidates from using Born in the USA. Adele refused to let Donald Trump use one of her songs in the 2016 election. There's been a lot of this. Fleetwood Mac has made some statements to that point as well. There are some other artists who have insisted that only Republicans use their songs. So you see the sort of convergence of entertainment and politics, and we see that all the time, right, on award shows and with political statements. But even when it comes to the art itself, its usage, you can see that. So that's an interesting one too. That's an interesting topic to explore, is the use of popular music in politics. Okay, political debates. Political debates are not about being entertaining, but they are. Political debates have really is evolved over the years appropriate? I don't really know. There's certainly been a lot of change. When you talk about political debates, you can't not talk about the 1960 debate between Kennedy and Nixon. Kennedy, I wish I'd gotten a screenshot and put it right in this big blank white space, but instead there's my face. Kennedy was a young, handsome, by all accounts, well-spoken candidate. Nixon has this sort of naturally kind of gruff exterior. And so in 1960, when the two were debating, there was a television debate, which Kennedy won. Interestingly, there's also a radio debate, which Nixon won. So how has the decision to televise debates even changed politics? Certainly, when it comes to debates, television personas are important too, and some people just have a better persona on television than others. Some people just present themselves. If you look at the Democrats from the recent debates that we've seen, there are certainly some Democrats who just present better than others, and a lot of those mannerisms and awkward idiosyncrasies have been pointed out for many of the candidates. I mean, from oh gosh, Tom Steyer's tie, his plaid ties, that caused a lot of commotion, to the criticism that Amy Klobuchar does not have like a command in her presence. It matters. Back in the 2016 primaries, Ben Carson got a lot of flack because he was so quiet and calm, right? And then you have someone like Donald Trump, who has a huge personality. We have to remember that Donald Trump is used to being on television. He's used to being in the public eye. He had The Apprentice for years, the reality television show. So he's very comfortable with the media, and that makes a difference. So debates the visual of the debate, the televised aspect can really impact politics. I would also say that studies have shown that women who are in the political arena, when they are complimented on their beauty, or when they're complimented on something that has to do with their visual presence, they tend to do worse in polling than women who are not complimented on their visual presence. And so that's an interesting point of research that I think would be something to pursue as well. Why is that? Is it because beauty is not equated with intelligence? Is it because I don't know, what is it? Why is that? Something to think about, and certainly to consider. Okay, so now I have some clips from the Trump-Clinton debates that I would like for you to watch. Let me go back and make sure I'm doing everything I should be doing, telling you to watch all the things. All right, so I have presidential debate highlights, Clinton and Trump trade blows. These are all pretty short, so watch them all. It's totally worth it. Let's see. I think I have three. One from all three of their debates. So the second presidential debate, and then I also have one from the town hall. So I want you to watch those three, because I think that most people would agree that the 2016 debates were the most entertaining when you look at it that way. But really look at it with a critical eye and think about how each of these candidates were presenting themselves to people through being on television. So not only through their words, but through their gestures, their presentation, how they comport themselves, and how that may have affected voters. And then, because all of this is very heavy and serious, I also have on the YouTube channel an SNL skit of the Trump and Clinton debates, because I think it just hits the nail on the head. So, so take a look at those, please, and then we'll come back and wrap this up. Okay, so hopefully you're back from watching those YouTube videos, and I'm curious to see what you think. I'll probably post a question about it in the forum. Well, I don't want to guide you through it too much because I'm really curious about what you yourself think about those debates and the SNL as well. But certainly those debates were, there was so much disagreement about them by the viewers and the people, whether or not then candidate Trump was aggressive, whether he was professional enough, whether he comported himself like a president, whether Hillary Clinton showed enough emotion and empathy. And that leads to questions like, do we expect Trump to show emotion and empathy, or do we just expect that of Hillary because she's a woman? So there were so many discussions surrounding those debates. So I'm curious to see what you saw in them and what you think. Okay, so wrapping up a bit, talking about social media and political campaigns. So really, you know, if you want to get technical about it, this really goes back to FDR and his fireside chats, which were so popular, and Americans could gather around the radio and listen, and he just presented himself as the leader, but also in an intimate way. Another great example of social media and political campaigns was when President Obama was running for his second term. Clint Eastwood, this is probably worth your Googling too. It was an interesting moment in American political history. Clint Eastwood was, I can't remember if he was at the Republican National Convention. I think he was. And he gave a speech where he spoke to an empty chair. And this became, as you can imagine, like this just took off on social media. The jokes that followed were many, plentiful, and pretty sharp. But he talked to an invisible chair, and it was this sort of anti-Obama speech. And then the next day, Obama on Instagram put up a photo of the back of his chair in the White House with him sitting in it and said, "This chair's already taken." Put him, right? So that was a famous moment. And then, of course, Trump and Twitter. But before we get to that, in 2016, in the final weeks of the campaign, the Trump campaign spent $150 million on Facebook ads targeting African-American voters with negative messages about Hillary Clinton. So social media played a huge role in the 2016 campaign. There are lots of great news pieces on this that you can find and watch. Some of them go and speak to people who worked on the social media campaign for Donald Trump. They talk about people who worked for Google and Facebook and other outlets who are actually embedded within the Trump campaign. And those outlets say that they offered the same to the Clinton campaign and they didn't take them up on it. You know, who knows? But it played a huge part. And now leading up to the 2020 election, there's so much discussion about the role of social media and how we can control it, how it should and could be used. We know that Russia purchased a lot of advertising on Google and on Facebook leading up to the 2016 election and used that to manipulate people. So what role does this have going forward, and how can we regulate it? Should we? What do we do? So we can't leave this conversation without talking about Trump and Twitter. So let me pull up Twitter and let's see what's been tweeted today. I'm making this video on April the 6th. So just to put it in context. Oh, look, it pops up all on its own. Twitter Trump. It's alliterative. I like it. Okay. I can't, it's so bright outside. I can't see my mouse. Wipe the pollen off the screen. Oh, there we go. Okay. Sorry, guys. Yes, Jack? I am taking forever, but I'm almost done, and they're glad I'm almost done too. Okay, so here are some tweets from today. White House news conference at 5:45 p.m. Eastern. Thank you. That might be one of the shortest tweets I've ever seen from Donald Trump. Congratulations to Representative Karen Whitsett of Michigan. So glad you're getting better. And this is, you can see by the ad why this has been reposted. Avoid crowds, social gatherings, and more than 10 people. Wash your hands. And here we go. Joe Biden wanted the date for the Democratic National Convention moved to a later time period. Now he wants a virtual convention, one where he doesn't have to show up. Gee, I wonder why. Also, whatever happened to that phone call he told the fake news he wanted to make to me? There's certainly a lot of them like that. Let me look for a couple more. These are all today. Advertising in the failing New York Times is way down. One might argue that's because there's a pandemic in New York. Washington Post is not much better. I can't say whether this is because they are fake news sources of information to a level that few can understand, or the virus is just plain beating them up. Fake news is bad for America. So that's an interesting tweet because it's equating the virus and fake news. You know, we have this from the message to Boris Johnson, who's just been put into ICU. But anyway, so we could go through, you know, here's one, take a look back and RT what the liberal media and Joe Biden said about President Trump's aggressive early response to the coronavirus. Anyway, so there have certainly been some, oh goodness, tunnel, light at the end of the tunnel. The lamestream media, my press conferences are vital, witch hunts, fake news, right? So there's so much to say about this. We've never had a politician or a leader who has used Twitter this way. I was reading an article, and I can't remember when it was dated, but how Trump had tweeted over 11,000 times since he became president. He's chosen it to be a way to communicate with the American people, which is pretty smart in some ways because it goes right to our phone, ping, there it is if you're a follower. Also, though, it's permanent. So things like Kofifi, if you don't know what that is, Google it or ask someone, that those things don't go away. There's a lot of criticism of his use of Twitter because, for example, right now in the midst of this pandemic, some would say, you know, is name calling and belittling, is that a good idea right now? Certainly he does a lot of name calling on there as well. And is that what we want in a commander in chief? Some people would say yes, that he's a straight shooter and it's all authentic. And then some people would say no, we hold you to this standard. I know, I will please be done by now. I'm almost done. So it's an intriguing time, and we'll see when we go forward, when we have a new president, whether that's this year or in 4 years, if Twitter is still used, or and also if President Trump still uses Twitter the way that he does now to insert himself into politics. So it'll be interesting to see. All right, last one, and everyone's glad. Okay, the October 2014 Pew report reported that 47% of consistent conservatives said Fox News was their main source, and no other news source was even close to that statistic. They also ranked their trust in news presentation. So the same group said that 88% of them trusted Fox News, 62% of them trusted Sean Hannity, 58% of them trusted Rush Limbaugh to give them news, and my son's putting my shoe on for me. I think he wants me to do something. And 51% trusted Glenn Beck. Now, when they, Jack, I'll put on my shoes. When they polled liberals, they had a mix of networks that they went to for their news as their main source. So 15% said CNN. You can see the statistics, NPR, MSNBC, and the New York Times. They also ranked their trust in certain news sources. And interestingly, it didn't come back a lot of individual people all associated with one network, but a lot of different networks. Bless you, Jack. So NPR, PBS, BBC, New York Times, NBC, CNN, ABC, MSNBC, and CBS were all considered trusted news sources by a variety of folks. So it just goes to show that our political polarization does affect our media habits, who we pay attention to, and how we get our news. And it's interesting that that the conservatives who were, and this is 2014, this is before the 2016 election, that were polled, all got their news from one source, as opposed to liberals who got them from various sources. Now, I can hear some of you thinking that's because all the other news sources are liberal. Well, no, not necessarily. If you go to All Sides and look at that graph I showed you at the beginning of the year, many of these, several of these sources are not considered liberal sources at all. And even so, at least it's a variety of sources instead of just one. So that's intriguing. It's just an intriguing set of statistics. All right, that's all I've got for you with politics and media habits. I'll put an activity up and I will post a question in the forum for you. I'm really excited to see what you do with this topic, and if anything really exciting happens on this topic coming up, I'll post an extra video because it's crazy times, man. And you know, what else do I have to do? Just sit outside, make videos for you guys. So, all right, talk to you soon. Thanks for tuning in once again to the Coon Communication Hour. And now I have to find my mouse again to end the video. Hope you guys are doing well. And I'll talk to you soon. Bye.